Welcome to Biggest Spoilars, the destination for exclusive spoilers, latest updates.
The embarrassment of cleaner Warhorse Rich's General Hospital has on screen of late has been nothing short of a gift for longtime cleaner suckers. This week, ABC longtime cleaner suckers got to watch two of the network's most fabulous day players partake important scenes together, and we were both gratified, pink and blown down. Emmy winners Michael E. Knight and Erica Slezak excited us for times in Pine Valley and Llanview, independently. Now, they've made it to Port Charles as two new characters, earning this week's Soap Central honors as GH Players of the Week. How can I help you, Joe? Both Slezak and Knight had us wisecracked when Ronnie first opened the Quartermain frontal door to find Martin Gray standing before her. They slightly conceded that they'd ever met, save for two brief twinkles at the tea party the day ahead. In fact, they had several scenes at the frontal door before the verity came out. Still, as soon as Ronnie got Marty into the living room and closed the double doors, their behaviors incontinently changed when they knew nothing differently was hearkening. General Hospital stars protested up a notch once Marty and Ronnie were alone. The verity came out. And so did Marty's dark side. We learned that Marty did indeed change Monica's will, but only after Ronnie had come to city and decided she abominated Tracy, Jane Elliott. She really did just want to pay felicitations to her family, but Marty smelled her in with an unrighteous plan. Slezak showed us Ronnie's guilt and jitters as she expressed her remorse for going along with Marty's scatterbrained scheme. Meanwhile, Knight brought out a new side of Marty. Rather than sticking with the bumbling schemer personality, we learned just how enraged Marty was when Tracy had him put behind bars in California before this time. He did not watch who suffered in order to get his vengeance. After punishing Drew, Cameron Matheson, for hanging to have an old lady arrested, Marty went and did the same thing. Knight was a far cry from Tad the cat as he growled at Ronnie and got in her face. Slezak portrayed Ronnie's shock and fear without having to say a word, while Marty grew more menacing. In just a many short twinkles, Knight's Marty made Slezak's Ronnie a sympathetic character. During the occurrences that followed, Slezak wore Ronnie's guilt on her face and sleeve while Marty regressed right back to apprentice mode with Drew and bumbling big family mode with Laura, Jeannie Francis. But these two cherished and consummate players gave us scenes we could only dream of during our times watching All My Children and One Life to Live. Port Charles, New York, in the sprawling, interconnected tapestry of life in Port Charles, moments of pure, unadulterated truth are as rare as a quiet day in the General Hospital emergency room. More often, reality is a fragile thing, shaped by half-truths, carefully constructed lies, and manipulations that fester in the shadows, poisoning relationships and destinies. Yet, when that fragile shell finally cracks, the resulting flood of revelation can wash away the foundations of empires and redefine the very landscape of the city. This week, in a stunning sequence of events that wove together a sacred ceremony, heartfelt affirmations, and venomous ultimatums, the town was rocked to its core by a confession years in the making. The enigmatic and troubled Ronnie finally broke, and in doing so, confessed the identity of the true architect behind her prolonged manipulation, sending shockwaves that will reverberate through the halls of power for years to come. The episode, aptly titled Baptism Begins, Encouraging Words, Angry Threats, was a masterclass in dramatic irony and escalating tension. On the surface, it was a day of celebration and new beginnings, the baptism of a child symbolizing hope and forgiveness. But beneath the serene facade, it was a pressure cooker of unresolved conflict, a gathering storm that would inevitably break, forcing long-buried secrets into the unforgiving light. The calm before the storm, a baptism of hope and hypocrisy. The setting was the timeless, hallowed space of the Port Charles Church, a location that has borne witness to more schemes and salvations than any other building in the city. The air was thick with the scent of incense and the weight of unspoken words. At the center of it all was the infant being baptized, a child whose very life was a testament to survival, redemption, and the complex, often painful, intertwining of the city's major families. Gathered around the font were the pillars of the community, the Corinthos family, the Quartermains, and various allies and enemies, all maintaining a temporary, tenuous truce for the sake of the child. The encouraging words were plentiful, yet each carried a subtle, double-edged meaning. The priest's homily spoke of washing away the sins of the past and embarking on a new path of light, a sentiment that landed differently on each guilty conscience in the pews. Family members offered soft-spoken blessings to the parents, their words of support often laced with unspoken anxieties and shared histories of trauma. The child, innocent and unaware, was the symbolic vessel for everyone's hope for a cleaner future, a chance to break the cycles of violence and retribution that had ensnared their parents' generation. Among the congregation, trying to blend into the shadows, was Ronnie. Once a formidable figure in the city's underworld power structure, she had been reduced to a ghost of her former self, haunted, paranoid, and visibly deteriorating under the immense weight of a secret she could no longer contain. Her eyes darted nervously around the chapel, avoiding contact, her hands trembling slightly. She was a live wire in a room full of kindling, and the sanctity of the event was the only thing preventing an immediate explosion. Across the aisle sat the very people she had wronged, the individuals whose lives she had helped topple through her actions. There was the steely gaze of the family patriarch, whose empire had been shaken. There was the grieving mother, whose loss Ronnie had indirectly facilitated. The baptism, a ceremony of forgiveness, only seemed to heighten the magnitude of her unforgivable deeds. Every prayer felt like an accusation, every hymn a dirge for her own morality. The cracking facade, from encouraging words to angry threats. As the ceremony concluded and the attendees filed out into the church courtyard, the delicate peace began to fray. The formalities gave way to casual, yet intensely charged, conversations. It was here that the encouraging words evolved, becoming more direct and pointed. A key ally, perhaps the one person who had ever shown Ronnie a modicum of undeserved kindness, pulled her aside. "You look like you're carrying the world on your shoulders, Ronnie," they said, their voice low and earnest. "This is a day of new beginnings. It's never too late to come clean, to free yourself. The truth has a way of coming out eventually, and it's better if it comes from you. You can still choose a different path." These words, meant as a lifeline, instead acted as a catalyst. They pierced the dam of Ronnie's resistance. The kindness in the tone, the offer of a potential redemption she knew she didn't deserve, was more than her burdened psyche could bear. The pressure that had been building for months, perhaps years, reached its critical mass. Simultaneously, the angry threats materialized. Another figure, one with everything to lose if Ronnie's secrets were ever revealed, cornered her near the church's ancient oak tree. His voice was a venomous whisper, his face a cold mask of menace. "I see you, Ronnie," he hissed. "I see you shaking. Don't you dare fall apart now. You remember the agreement. You open your mouth, and it's not just you who suffers. We made sure you have plenty to lose. So you will keep your head down, you will stay silent, and you will remember who really holds the power here. One wrong word, and I will finish what was started. I will burn your entire world to the ground." This threat, designed to reinforce her compliance, had the opposite effect. It was the final push. The juxtaposition of the encouraging plea for truth and the angry demand for silence created an unbearable cognitive dissonance. Trapped between a potential path to salvation and the guaranteed road to damnation, Ronnie's composure shattered. The confession, the name that shattered the silence. It did not happen in a private room or a police interrogation suite. The breakdown occurred right there in the public courtyard, under the watchful eyes of God and the entire Port Charles elite. A seemingly innocuous comment from one of her past victims, a simple, "I hope you can find peace, Ronnie," was the straw that broke the camel's back. She let out a choked sob, her body slumping against the stone wall of the church. All eyes turned to her. The chatter ceased. The air grew still. "I can't," she cried out, her voice raw with anguish. "I can't find peace. Don't you understand? There is no peace for me. There never will be." The crowd stared, a mixture of shock, confusion, and dawning realization on their faces. The man who had threatened her tried to intervene, to physically steer her away, but she shook him off with a sudden, surprising strength. "No. No more. I'm done being your puppet. I'm done carrying this." And then, the moment of truth arrived. Tears streamed down her face as she scanned the crowd, her eyes finally landing on the one person she had feared most. It was him, she screamed, her finger pointing a trembling, accusatory line across the courtyard. He's the one. He's been pulling my strings from the very beginning. The name that fell from her lips sent a collective, audible gasp through the crowd. It was a name of power, respect, and influence. It was a name that belonged to someone standing among them, someone who had just participated in the Holy Sacrament, someone who had offered their own encouraging words to the parents. It was a name that was above reproach, a name the city trusted. The reveal was devastating in its brilliance. This individual, let's refer to him as the architect for the sake of this narrative, was not a typical mobster or a mustache-twirling villain. He was a pillar of the community, a philanthropist, a trusted confidant to many in that very courtyard. His manipulation of Ronnie was not through crude threats of violence alone, but through a more insidious form of control, psychological warfare, financial entrapment, and the exploitation of her deepest vulnerabilities. He had identified her ambitions and her weaknesses and had offered her a path to power, all the while weaving a web of complicity so dense she could never escape. He held damaging information over her, yes, but he also held the promise of protection and belonging, making her both his prisoner and his willing accomplice. Ronnie's confession was a torrent, a cathartic release of years of pent-up guilt and fear. She detailed the first approach, the initial favors that seemed harmless. She spoke of the gradual escalation, the point of no return when she had committed an irrevocable act on his orders. She named dates, locations, and specific crimes, the corporate espionage that brought down a rival business, the fabricated evidence that sent an innocent man to prison, the strategic leak of information that led to a character's tragic death. Each revelation was a bomb, detonating the carefully constructed narratives that had defined the last several years of Port Charles history. The architect's face, initially a mask of shocked indignation, slowly hardened. The kindly benefactor persona melted away to reveal the cold, calculating strategist beneath. He did not deny it. He didn't need to. The truth of Ronnie's words was written in the cold defiance of his eyes. The aftermath, a new world order in Port Charles. The fallout was immediate and chaotic. The angry threats that had been whispered before were now shouted. Alliances that had seemed unbreakable shattered in an instant. The baptism, intended to be a unifying event, had instead become the crucible in which the old order was burned away. For the victims of Ronnie and the architect's schemes, the confession was a painful but necessary vindication. The grieving mother finally had a target for her rage, a name to attach to the vague forces she believed had destroyed her family. The disgraced businessman saw a path to clearing his name. Their encouraging words for each other now held genuine hope, a tangible sense that justice, however delayed, was finally within reach. For the architect, the game was now out in the open. His power had always resided in the shadows, in his ability to manipulate from behind the scenes. Exposed, he was forced to switch tactics. His angry threats were no longer directed solely at Ronnie, but at the entire assembly. He warned of the chaos that would follow if his empire were to fall, hinting at the countless other lives and reputations he would drag down with him. It was a declaration of war, not with fists, but with secrets. Ronnie, utterly spent, was led away by police detectives who had been alerted to the very public confession. She was no longer a master manipulator, but a broken tool, finally free from the hand that wielded her. Her fate was now in the hands of the legal system, but for the first time in years, she could breathe without the weight of the secret crushing her lungs. The deeper implications, a parable of power and complicity. The events of that day transcend mere soap opera theatrics. They serve as a powerful narrative about the nature of power, manipulation, and the search for redemption. Ronnie's character arc is a tragic one. She is a cautionary tale about the cost of compromising one's morals for a seat at the table of power. Her confession was not just an act of exposing a villain, it was an act of self-annihilation. By speaking the truth, she was accepting her own culpability and surrendering to the consequences, a fate she had spent years trying to avoid. Her journey begs the question, is redemption found in the confession itself, or in the punishment that follows? The revelation of the architect as the true mastermind forces a re-evaluation of everything the audience thought they knew. The true villain was not the obvious, brutish enforcer, but the respectable, sophisticated man in the tailored suit. This reflects a sobering reality about power structures, both in fiction and in life. The most dangerous individuals are often those who operate under a veneer of legitimacy, whose encouraging words are merely tools for control. The baptismal setting was not merely a dramatic backdrop, it was thematically central. The sacrament is meant to cleanse original sin, to offer a fresh start free from the burdens of the past. In a twisted, meta-narrative way, Ronnie's confession was her own baptism. It was a violent, public cleansing of the sin she had been carrying. It was messy, painful, and far from holy, but it was, in its own way, a rebirth. The old Ronnie, the manipulated puppet, died in that courtyard, and what emerges in her place remains to be seen. Furthermore, the storyline explores the complex dynamic between the manipulator and the manipulated. Was Ronnie a victim or a villain? The narrative cleverly argues that she was both. The architect exploited her weaknesses, but she made the conscious choices to cross moral lines. Her confession does not erase her crimes, but it does recontextualize them, forcing the other characters, and the audience, to grapple with the shades of gray that define human morality. In the end, Baptism Begins, Encouraging Words, Angry Threats was more than an episode title, it was a synopsis for a pivotal turning point in the history of Port Charles. The encouraging words of a friend provided the courage, the angry threats of an enemy provided the desperation, and the backdrop of a baptism provided the symbolic weight for a truth that could no longer be contained. The confession has been made, the name has been spoken, and the landscape of the city is forever changed. The path to justice will be long and fraught with new dangers, but for the first time, it is a path that is visible, lit by the explosive flash of a long-buried secret finally seeing the light of day. The war for the soul of Port Charles has just begun, and the battle lines have been drawn in the most sacred of places.